with your college navigator, who is the person at your school. We have Sarah Kessler. She'll introduce herself in 1 minute. But anyway, Jordan will talk for about an hour, and the recording will be shared with your school so that if you have to step away or you come in late, etc., you'll be able to get a recording of this. So thank you for being here tonight. Sarah, do you want to just say who you are?
Hi, yeah, I am Sarah Kessler. I'm the College and Career Navigator at Whitman. I am new this year. I've been busy working with seniors a lot, but I'm looking forward to getting to know juniors. So feel free to come by, email, make an appointment, or stop by and say hi. Thank you.
All right. Well, first off, Sarah and Kate, thank you for hosting this evening. For those of you who don't go to Whitman and to BCC, and you're like, well, who's my college career navigator or whatever they're now called? It used to be CCIC. Every one of the schools in MCPS has one. And it's right there on our website. And I highly encourage you to use and take advantage of the knowledge that those people have. They do this job because they care about you. They want to help you as you're preparing for the college process. And the sooner you can talk to them in junior year, the easier it's going to be for you to start to navigate all of what we're discussing today. We're going to be discussing one very specific component of all this, and that is how to go about building a college list, from doing research to identify what the right fit is for you and what factors go into this. End of the day, there's a lot more that does go into this. It's why Ms. Heald and why Ms. Kessler are going to host more of these sessions throughout the coming months. But for today, I'm going to ask you that as we go through this with such a large group, please feel free to throw your questions in the chat. Kate and Sarah will pin them or hold on to them. And when I pause, I will ask them to share them or to let me know. That way I can make sure to address as many of your questions as possible. One housekeeping request: please don't ask an uber specific question that would only apply to you. If it is something specific, think about how it might help the greater population, because right now we have 141 of you in here. I'm guessing we'll get up to close to 200 tonight. So I want to make sure that everyone gets to learn, and it's super specific. I'll ask you to email me later tonight or tomorrow. I'll put my email in the chat so you can do so, but I'll try to address all questions here that pertain to the majority of you. That in mind, let's get things started. Before we actually dig into the meat of tonight, I do want to introduce myself. My name is Jordan Kanarek. I'm a partner of CollegeWise and the founder of Kanarek Consulting. I don't introduce myself because I like to talk about myself a lot. I don't, but I think it's important that you know the individual on the other end actually has experience and is sharing useful information with you. So I've been a college counselor with CollegeWise and on my own through the two of them for 10 years. Actually, my 10-year anniversary was on Sunday. So I've been doing this for exactly 1 decade, just as an independent educational consultant. Prior to that, I worked at the Princeton Review, where I directed the counseling and management team for the entire DMV. And before that, I interned in the Gettysburg College admissions office. And before that, I myself was a student at Gettysburg College. Way back before that, just by a couple years, I was a student of CollegeWise. So student has become the master. And I'm really looking forward tonight to sharing what I know about this topic with you. So first and foremost, I always like to start with sort of a big picture outlook, because it's so easy to join this thinking, how am I going to go to college? I got a B last quarter. Like, am I going to school? And the answer is yes. You're going to hear a lot of people over the next couple of months and years talk about University of Pennsylvania and the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Oh, and how my daughter got into the University of Southern California, these uber selective schools. And here's the truth of it, folks. There's only about 50 schools that are uber selective. Only about 50 of them that fall into this little sickle right here. And this pizza slice, there's a greater number of schools that have about a 30 to 40% admit rate. That's where your UMD is falling these days. But then you have this Pac-Man piece, okay? And that is over 2/3 of the colleges in this nation. So if you're on this call as a junior with a 3.2 GPA and you haven't even taken your first SAT and you're like, am I going to college? The answer is yes. There are hundreds of schools who would accept you and be happy to have you be a member of their student body. Please do not walk into this thinking that there's no chance I go to school. Maybe there's no chance you go to Harvard, but I would ask each and every one of you, why is Harvard the right place for you? Because it's highly ranked? Because a family friend went there? Because a grandparent went there? That's a terrible reason as to why Harvard might be good for you. So a lot of what we're going to dig into tonight is identifying what the right fit is for you, how to go about identifying that, looking at schools and so on. Okay. And so just as a reminder, there are over 1,200 schools in this nation that have a 50% admit rate or higher. And over that, who accept 2/3 of the students who apply. So yes, at some point this year, Kate and Sarah will be hosting a seminar on or webinar on highly selective admissions, your MITs, your Harvards, and so on. But that's not our focus tonight. Our focus is on schools like these. Schools like Ohio State or the University of Arizona or Auburn, schools that are known across the nation, but that have a 50% or higher admit rate. Schools where students who are average, or in this case, below average in the eyes of a grade or a BCC, because everyone takes 5 APs, will accept you when you have 2 APs or 1 AP or 4 honors because they want good students like you. So please, if there's one thing you take away from tonight, I hope that it's that you do not have to have 14 APs and a 5.7 GPA and 17 letters of recommendation to go to a good school. Okay? Now, that said, we're going to be talking about how you identify where to look and what tools you should be using. So the first thing I want to dig into is why finding the right fit makes sense. Why do I need to find the right fit? Why not just apply to the top 10 schools for biology on US News World Rankings? Well, because the moment you do that, you're not thinking about why you're a good candidate. And so when UPenn asks one of the toughest questions out there in 250 words of why do you want to come to UPenn and what will UPenn gain from you? Do you know what most people first think of? Well, you're UPenn. You're a great school. You think that's what they want to hear? Probably not. You need to be able to explain to any institution when they ask you an essay of that nature why you belong there. And if you don't take the time to understand what these schools have to offer you, you just apply because it's highly selective, you're going to fall flat regardless of how strong a candidate you are. And so students who focus on finding the right fit almost always end up with a greater outcome, leading to happiness and success. They almost always end up with more admissions, and they end up with schools that want to give them money so that you don't end up paying $80,000 to $90,000 a year for undergrad, because quite frankly, and I'll say it out loud, that's asinine. Why are we spending that sort of money? You might have it, but what about grad school? Or even if you're not considering grad school, why do you need to pay that amount of money? Convince me, convince mom and dad, convince your kid if you're the parent trying to tell them to do that. Finding the right fit leads to better outcomes. It's as simple as that. So, for those of you who have a friend whose kid just got into a school that you don't really know about, but how they got $40,000 a year, it's because of that. So many of us consider the rankings. We ask ourselves, what do I need to do so that I can put my kid in a position where they get into a top 20 school? But for those of you who don't believe me that this is true, watch Malcolm Gladwell's video called Zeitgeist. His video Zeitgeist is about 40 minutes or so, and it's Malcolm Gladwell speaking to the Google execs about how we as a society put an emphasis on these rankings, but how statistically we have proven that ranking plays zero correlation and has zero correlation in what happens next. The major certainly can, but the correlations between what happens on said campus, not the ranking of said campus. So every year I have students who get into highly selective schools and who end up deciding they want to pay the $90,000. And that is your prerogative as a family. Just like every year I have students who end up with over $1 million in aid across 10 different schools, and they get to decide, where am I going to go because I am going to come out of college with no debt. And this comes into the fit conversation. As a family, have you talked about budget? Have you talked about what you're willing to spend on college? For many families, we don't. We either don't want to have that conversation because it's a tough one, or the student doesn't want to listen to it because they just don't think it matters. But it's one of the most important conversations we can have because it really does help identify what sort of schools might make sense for us to look at. If we were in a crowd right now, I would ask this question, but since we're not, feel free to comment in the chat. Give me a 1 if you know someone who got merit aid, merit, not financially, but merit from a school like a Harvard or a Yale. And give me a 2 if you don't know anyone who's gotten said merit. Interesting. A lot of 2s. You know why? Because the schools we're talking about will meet 100% of financial need, meaning that if you can prove through these federal forms for government aid and so on that you need money, yeah, we'll take care of you. But the truth of it is that most families who come from city-based areas or suburbs, and a lot of those are in the Bethesda, Potomac, so on area, don't qualify for financial aid. And so when that kid gets into the school and they go, well, Harvard, if you want us to come, you're gonna have to give us some money. Harvard's gonna say, that's great. So we'll talk to you later. Best of luck. We're gonna take the next person in line who's clawing to give us $100,000 check per year. And that is their prerogative. It may be yours. But if you're trying to figure out how you get money from these schools, someone just mentioned ROTC. Yeah, if your students want to participate in ROTC, that's a great way to potentially get some scholarship money, right? But the more you focus on prestige, the less the conversation comes to money. We're getting slightly off topic there, but I want to bring it in. So let's start with how do we even go about this? Where do I start with this conversation? Here are 5 questions I strongly encourage you to take a picture of or write down or email me after. I'll send you the slides. I'll send them to anybody who wants them. But these are 5 questions worth asking your teenager. Teenagers aren't the best at reflection. I'm 36. I'm not the best at reflection. But when you ask a kid what they want from college, you're going to get a lot of, oh, Indiana. Why? They just won, and Mendoza was so good out there, right? Or Miami, they made it to the NCAA finals. Is that a good reason? No. So let's keep going. What do you like about your environment at Whitman or at BCC? Do you like that you have access to so many clubs, or do you not like that there's sort of this pressure on you to compete with all these APs, right? What do you like about Quince Orchard? Is it the fact that everyone loves the football team and that your high school football team can beat some of the D3 teams out there? Okay, so is your focus going to be on that side of things? The things you're asking are to help you start to consider what you want versus what you need in a college. You may want a big sports team, but do you need that? If you're a 5-star recruit and you're an offensive tackle, probably, yeah, that's how you make it to the big leagues, right? If you just like it because it seems fun, what else? Because there are hundreds of teams out there that compete at the D1 level. And what sport do you care about? That's just a sports conversation. What are your priorities? For many people, the priority is academics, as it should be. You're a student. Even if you're an athlete, you're a student athlete. But when you make that the focus, now you're no longer thinking about the fit, you're thinking about the rankings again. So asking all these questions allows you to start creating a list, and then you can use that list to start building a list of colleges. And so there are a lot of different components. Do you want a big school or a small school? Do you like the idea of being in a city and walking outside your dorm room and having access to the world around you? Or are you like me and you need to be somewhere where you're in the middle of nowhere so you're not distracted by the city? How much does the financial component come in? What activities do you need access to? A couple of years ago, I worked with a nationally ranked cyclist. So we had to find schools where he would have access to the open roads and to the mountains. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. So even though there were some great schools out there that were in cities, he wouldn't even look at them because those would not fit what he needed, right? These are the things that you need to start talking about. And so when I asked at the beginning of this call, what year are you, 10th, 11th? A lot of you commented 11th. It's January, so there's plenty of time. But all of the students I work with personally, they're already deep in the midst of building a list, starting to plan visits over the spring break. You know why? Not because you're behind if you haven't, but because you want to take advantage of the time you have. Starting this summer does not leave you enough time to thoughtfully build a list while also doing all the other things we need you to be doing. So these conversations, parents, students, start having them now. And end of the day, you're going to start with what I like to call the window shopping phase. You don't go into a mall, or I mean, no one goes to malls anymore, so I'm going to outdate myself here, but you don't go into a mall and go into every shop and try something on every shop. You walk by, you window shop. And that's what I want each of you to start doing tonight, tomorrow, this weekend, when we get 10 inches of snow and you can't do anything anyways. And to do that, it doesn't cost money. There are a lot of free sites out there like Big Future, Unigo, and Niche, where you can learn about schools from afar. I love Unigo. Unigo, UNIGO, which is on the screen right now. That's one of those ones where you go to that site, you type in a school, and you get student reviews. Now, I'll be the first to tell you some of those reviews aren't all that helpful. And the way that they are able to source these reviews is by offering students a chance to win a $2,000 scholarship. So you'll go on there and you'll see that David just typed in the letter D 100 times. Thank you, David. Not helpful, but then you go to the next one. And you see that school you thought you'd like is actually considered by a lot of students to be a pressure cooker. That a lot of the students who go there are really heavily focused on STEM. That people really like having access to the city, but it can feel overwhelming. Now you're wondering, I go to school really close to DC. I go to a school that's a pressure cooker. And I go to a school that people have like really focused on robotics and other things. And I don't like that. So now you get to compare what you know to what they're talking about at the school and decide, is that the right thing for me? Only you get to answer that, but you have to take this seriously. And when you just look at the ranking or you just look at the size, you're not helping yourself to learn what you want versus what you don't want. And so, for those of you who live in the DMV area, which is pretty much everyone on this call, I would say go do a tour of the University of Maryland. Even if you're like, Jordan, I can't get in there, or Jordan, I don't want a big school. Fine. Tell me why. Tell me why you don't want Maryland. Then go do a tour of American University and GW. Well, Jordan, those are private schools. Yeah, you know what? Those private schools cost less for some students than out-of-state public schools. So stop with this whole thing about how private schools are bad buys. Private schools are sometimes better buys at the likely level, schools where you're likely to get in, than out-of-state schools. Visit this 5,000 person campus in the northwest suburb of DC and tell me how that differentiates for you from Maryland. Just right there, you have two vastly different schools, 30 minutes from home, right? You can window shop in a way that doesn't take you too far from home, that doesn't require you to buy flights and so on, and you can learn at little to no cost. My two favorite books are listed here, the Princeton Review Guide and the Fisk Guide. Some of you may know these already. And if you do, it's because you've visited Miss Heald and Miss Kessler's offices or your CCN and you've seen those books in the background for you to borrow. And if you want your own to mark up and make pretty little colors in there, buy it online on Amazon for $27. They're great buys because it costs a lot less than some of the other options out there. Okay? And then when we consider the idea of going to schools, if you've already seen a couple of these local ones and done a campus tour and an info session, now you get to say, okay, I don't like big schools. I think I like the size of American, and I also like the idea of GW. And now you can use that and compare it to sites like Big Future and Niche, where you can mark things on the side to start telling them what you like and dislike and figure out what other schools might make sense for you. And all this can be done from the comfort of your home or a simple drive to a local school. Now you started building a list and you think you have schools you like. So let's go ahead and go into the shops and browse the aisles, so to speak. This is where you're going to do a deeper dive. You'll notice in the last conversation, I didn't say go to the school website. The reason is right now, we actually don't need to know a lot about specifics. We need to know if this is a place where you can see yourself, hence the window shopping. Now you know you actually kind of like University of Maryland. And so you go online and you find out that they have hundreds of degrees. Oh, so what if I don't know what I want to study? There's a lot of different options. You know that your family, that your parents, one of them is from Kazakhstan and the other is from England. And you know you want to spend some time abroad. And you look at the study abroad options and see just how many options they have, right? These are things you don't need to do for 100 different schools, 200 different schools. You're probably doing this for 30-ish schools because you start to develop a list based on your wants and needs. And at that point, that's when you start planning where you want to go. Because quite frankly, you might like the idea of Wisconsin, Madison, or Michigan, but what's the point of spending hundreds of dollars to fly there and stay there until you know it's what you want? So before you actually try it on for size, browse the aisles, window shop, give yourself the opportunity to learn about these schools in a way that doesn't cost you a lot of time and money. And for those of you right now who are like, well, what do I do with the coming spring break? There are two recommendations I make to anyone I don't yet know. The first is Boston. You know why? Because you have 5 or 6 different highly competitive schools in the area and more that are less competitive. In Boston, you have Boston University, Northeastern University, Boston College, Tufts University, MIT, and Harvard, all either in the city or within about 30 minutes of the city. You also have University of Massachusetts, Boston, not Amherst, but the Boston campus. You have Suffolk University as a small school, right? You have Emerson University. Some of you may know about Emerson University because on Stranger Things, the star-crossed lovers are both applying to it, and one gets in and the other isn't applied, right? But it's actually just a really good school for BFAs, Bachelors of Fine Arts, okay? All that exists in what is known as the greatest college town in America, Boston. But let's say you don't want to go all the way up to Boston. It's too cold. It's too far from home. Beautiful. Let's go up into the Pennsylvania region. First, let's start in Philadelphia. In Philly, you have UPenn, an uber selective Ivy League school. You also have Drexel and Temple. Drexel and Temple are less selective. One is a state school and larger, Temple. One is a private school and a bit smaller, but still medium-sized, Drexel. You go a bit outside the city limits You see Haverford and Swarthmore, two highly competitive selective small liberal arts colleges. And just a little bit further out, Villanova, a medium-sized private school that is more suburban and gives you a sense of what a medium suburban school could look like. You take us in the middle of the state, meet Liberal Arts Central. My alma mater, Gettysburg, is there. And about 30 minutes from there is Dickinson in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And my point here is just in Pennsylvania, in middle to eastern or up to Boston, you can get a sense of a lot of what's out there in one of those trips. And yeah, I could do that for a number of other parts of the country, but because those are closer and sometimes easier to get to by flight or car, they're two of the ones I recommend to students who are considering whether or not they want something small, medium, large, close to city, outside city, in city. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second because over the last 20-ish minutes, I've thrown a lot at you, and I know that it's hard to kind of keep up and type questions. So I'm going to make a pause for a moment. Kate, Sarah, are there any questions so far? Anything that you want to address that I haven't yet?
I don't really see anything. Somebody asked about scholarships, but oh, okay. Recommendations for a range of schools closer to DC.
Sure. So if we're talking DC, in DC proper, you have Georgetown, GW, and American. All right. On the southern side of that, you have George Mason University just over there in Fairfax. And then if you're going a little bit further north, you have University of Maryland. So you have 5 right there you could consider. You also have Howard in the city, which may be worth seeing. Gallaudet, if you're looking for schools that are that help students of the deaf. If you want to go a bit further, you could go down into Southern Virginia, where you have a number of schools from William and Mary and UVA and Virginia Tech and James Madison University. You also have small, less selective liberal arts colleges like Roanoke and Shenandoah. I have a student this year, 2.6 GPA, really struggled in high school due to his dyscalculia and dyslexia. Both those schools I just mentioned, Roanoke and Shenandoah, give him over $30,000 a year in scholarship money. So it'll cost about $25,000 a year to go there, 2.6 GPA. Guys, there's a lot of schools out there who will beg for you to come there where you can get a great education, the hands-on assistance you need. What sort of things would you look, what sort of things should we look at that may differentiate at the website level? It's hard to, if you're looking at school websites, then it's going to be hard. That's why I'm saying use the sites I mentioned before, like Niche, Big Future, Unigo. Use the books like the FISC Guide where it breaks it down to a 1 to 2 page. Going to the school websites, like I said, that's your second step. That's where it gets overwhelming and you want to know what schools, already know what schools you like so you can do that deeper dive. These are the tools I use for students and my own students will use to kind of navigate through that initial phase that's overwhelming. How do you approach the window shopping and browsing when interests in professional degrees like law or medicine are similar? Excellent question, and one I was going to get to later, but let's dig in now. I'm actually going to fast forward us here to a different slide, and then I will come back. But this is a case study. Your child wants to be a lawyer. There's a common misconception that to go to a highly selective law school, grad school after undergrad, you need to go to highly selective undergrads. What you'll see here is from a couple years ago, the students who got into Harvard's 2021 law class and where they went to undergrad. You'll see on this list, yeah, there are some highly competitive schools on here, say Haverford, Harvard, Hopkins. But you're also going to see on here schools like Auburn, like Arizona State, where the joke is that 120% of that they have 120% admit rate. Montana State is on here. And if you go to the second page, there's more of them. Sure, you have your University of Michigan's, but you also have SUNY Fredonia. If any of you can tell me where that is without looking at a map, I'll give you $1 via Venmo, right? The name of the institution you go to in undergrad does not play a role in the grad school admissions. What plays a role are 3 defining factors. Your undergrad GPA in the major you've selected, the score you get on the LSAT or MCAT or whatever school requirement you have for that particular program, and the opportunities that were afforded to you in college, either over summer with internships or through your pre-health, pre-law, so on, advisories. And so where do you think it's easier to maintain a GPA that's really strong? A school like my alma mater, Gettysburg, or at Harvard? Where do you think you're more likely to be able to compete more readily for those opportunities within those pre-health advisories? At a smaller school or less selective school where you're a very strong candidate, or again, at a UPenn? So if you're talking about those pieces, the law school, the med school, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is let go of these highly selective and highly expensive schools because you're going to want to spend that 500,000 plus, correct? I said 500,000 plus on a strong med school. If you're already going into your pocket for 300 to 400,000 on undergrad, you're looking at $1 million investment right there. Sorry, that doesn't seem to make sense to me if you can do the same thing and spend about a quarter of that in undergrad. So there's a
Jordan,
lot.
I just wanted to chime in. Totally agree with you. And on the parent perspective, I never thought about this when my daughter went to school, but most of her close friends were pre-med, and having a medical center close, right on campus was a huge advantage in terms of jobs, opportunities, to shadow and things like that. So that's something to think about is what can the campus atmosphere, how can that enhance the education as well?
So one of the most popular options I like to recommend to students is the University of Rochester. The University of Rochester is a competitive institution, about a 35% admit rate. It has 2 hospitals basically on campus that students get ample experience on while they're in college. But there are people who decide that they're going to go to a more selective school that maybe in the middle of nowhere or something of that nature because it's a better school. Stop thinking about the undergrad pedigree and thinking about the opportunities that could be afforded to you. So anyone here know where Beloit College is? Beloit is a small liberal arts college in Wisconsin. Okay, there we go. Beloit has one of the highest matriculation rates to top med schools in the nation. One of the highest. And the majority of candidates who show good demonstrated interest, we'll come back to that in a moment, and who have strong grades will get a near full ride to it. And then they potentially get the opportunity to get into one of the best pre-med advisories, pre-health advisories in the nation at a tiny little school and then matriculate to their UPenn. And I tell people that all the time. Do you know how many people actually do it? Next to none. Because Beloit, I don't know that. But I do know University of Michigan or University of Wisconsin. It doesn't mean that kids don't go from those schools, as you see on this list right here, right? University of Wisconsin-Madison is on this list for Harvard, as is Michigan. But if we're talking about trying to save money for med school or put yourself in the best position, you don't need the pedigree at the undergrad level. So I'm going to keep going with the questions here. Is touring without a guided tour sufficient to see more campuses versus setting up guided tours? That's a great question. And Kate or Sarah, if you can remind me after, I'm going to post in the chat. There's a good list out there of schools that track demonstrated interest versus those who don't. So to give you an example, everyone who goes to Boston says they're going to see Harvard. Harvard doesn't care if you come to campus. You could go to campus every day for 4 years. It would make no difference. You know who does care? Northeastern University, Boston University, Tufts University. But people will prioritize the name over schools that care about you come to campus. So there are ways to do online info sessions and whatnot from the comfort of your home, which I always recommend. But the general rule of thumb is if the school's within a 3-hour drive and they track demonstrated interest, you want to try and make an effort to get to them. Because if you can't make the effort to find 3 hours or a day to do that, that's a bit telling. But if it's Boston, they know that not everyone can get up there, or that life gets in the way. So a lot of them you can do online info sessions. You just type into Google school name, virtual info session or tour. They exist. Okay. But I would try to get on some campuses to start to get a feel for them when you can. No, you don't need to know what you want to do with the rest of your lives in order to find the right fit. You need to start to identify the things that are important to you. Like we are just talking about, some kids are going to want to go to school for pre-med. Do you know how many kids drop out of that because it's just too stressful? Most of them, right? And then kids get to med school and still drop out, right? So you don't need to know what you need to want to do, but you need to be interesting because the more competitive the school, the more they care about interesting candidates. Is there a program that connects interested students with a student who goes to their interested college? Yeah, actually, this one right here that I was talking about, I didn't mention it before, but there's something called the College Tour. There's a way, I don't know if they still do it. They were trying to, but then COVID kind of screwed them up. But there's some sites that can do that. But really, if you want to do that, go on forums. Go to Reddit, go to Facebook and ask a student who goes to that school, they'd be willing to talk to you. Or reach out to the admissions office and ask them if there's a student. For example, Bates College. If you go on their website, a lot of these small liberal arts colleges do this, they have Bobcat chats where current students will go online with 1 to 10 or whoever, how many kids sign up and talk to them about their experience. But you got to go online. You can't just kind of let these things fall on your lap. It's why we're talking about this today, because you have time to do it, but something you want to start investigating and spending time doing. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to answer one more and then I'm going to pause. I promise we will come back, but I'm just going to make sure we have time for everything else. How many schools on average should a student apply to? I tend to say about 8 to 10. I think that if you build a balanced college list, 8 to 10 is the perfect number. How many are most students applying to? 15, 16. It's too many. It doesn't make sense, but they're all doing the same thing. Couple likelies, couple targets, and then applying to 10 to 12 reaches, hoping that something comes of it. Well, when year over year, so from 2023 to 2025, there was an increase in about 3.7 million applications. 3.7 million. There was only an increase in 10% of students applying. 3.7 million and 10% don't match up. And when you look at 3.7, of those 3.7, 2.6 million of them went to the same 50 colleges. You want to know which 50? Look at the US News World Rankings. Don't focus on prestige. Focus on what you need to be competitive. Okay, pausing there. I will come back. Where were we? Asking better questions. It's not about if a school is good or bad or if it's the right college, but what it is that you need. Why is that school a good fit for you? So this is that part of where I'd say, like, if we're in a crowd right now, I'd ask you to raise your hand and tell me what your dream school is. And someone would say Duke, and I'd say why? And they'd say, because my parents are Blue Devils. Sounds like a terrible reason for it to be a good fit for you. What is it you like about it? They're really good at basketball. Okay. What do you like about its access to the research triangle? The what? What do you like about their interdisciplinary approach to their arts and sciences? Sorry, you said inter what? Well, I really want to be an engineer and get experience in biology. At Duke, it's really hard to get experience in both their College of Engineering and their arts and sciences. You need to start to investigate why these schools that have single-digit Abbott rates are on your list. Because if you don't, you're going to do what all these kids I just mentioned do who apply to 16 schools and then scratch their head when they don't get into 10 of the 16. And the ones they do get into are targets and likelies. Focus on the quality of the reason as to why you want to go, not the quantity you apply to. Because to me, why would you spend over $2,000 just in application fees to apply to 18 colleges? I've never understood that, but that's for people to make a decision for themselves. What's the best college for me and where can I thrive are two of the most important questions because it shows you that you're not thinking about what's the best college, but what you need to be successful in this process. And when you do that, you will have less stress. You will have a better chance of being admitted to these schools because your responses will show it and you spent more time showing demonstrated interest, and the likelihood of you getting more money, especially with the targets and likelies on your list, is a lot higher. And to that point, one of the things that I've been reminding students of, anyone here familiar with Slate? Whether you are or you are not, most colleges now use it, and it is a system that allows them to track your approach to their emails. So for those parents who've been telling their kid, you should click on those emails, and the kid's like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Your parents are right. Now, you don't need to do it for 150 schools, and you don't need to start doing it today. But the reason I want you to start considering what colleges you care about is by April time. Let's say you have a short list of 20. That school emails you. Yeah, you should open that email. You know why? Because Slate, what it does is it tracks the specific URL you are sent. Yeah, each one of you are getting a very specific URL in your email and what you do with it. So for those of you who just click delete and then apply to the school thinking that that's enough, it might be depending on how likely it is for you. But that school, even if they take you, may not give you much aid because they don't think you're serious about them. But let's say that you really like Dickinson and the emails they send you, open up the link. And then from that link, you go and navigate to their arts and to like their biology department and look at it. And you look at the research. Now they see the amount of time you spent there. So it matters. That's a way of showing demonstrated interest. And no, it doesn't matter for giant state schools like UCLA or highly competitive schools like Harvard, but it does matter for your targets and likelies, the very ones that you're thinking that you don't care as much about, they care even more that you're doing this. So take the time to review your email. And here's the truth. It's a good thing to start getting used to looking at your email. Because after you apply to colleges, they're going to send you a portal. That portal is somewhere where they're going to tell you what they're missing after you apply, if they're missing anything. It's also where they're going to update you with their decisions. You know, many of my teenagers, especially my boys, don't look for the email and then don't find out that they've been admitted or that they got pushed from early to regular decision because they didn't get something to them. Starting to learn to check your email, kids, is important. You may prefer text, but email is something that you're going to need when you step into internships, into college, and so on. But to the question about schools, for most students, I recommend 3 likelies, 3 targets, and anywhere from 4 to 6 reaches. Okay. But that number changes depending on you and your family needs. Let's say that you know that you are not going to be able to pay full pay. It's just something that's not in the cards for us. Then there should be 0 reaches. Maybe 1 or 2 that you decide you're willing as a family to go into debt for if that's your prerogative. But now I'm focusing more on likelies because the likelies are the ones that are more likely to really push to get you. Either by offer you in-state tuitions to state school or potentially offer you a lot of merit aid. So that list I just made really depends on your needs financially. You don't need to know today what it is that you want to do in the future. But what you should start to identify today is what matters to you in college. And these visits, these online websites that I'm showing you, if these books I suggested, if you start slowly and methodically working through them, students, you're going to find that this process is not nearly as stressful as people make it out to be. A quick word on prestige. In front of you is a list of CEOs and the colleges they went to. And the reason I like to show this slide is every college on this slide has a 50% or higher admit rate. Okay. And to be honest, I haven't actually updated this from last year, so I believe there's one that already changed, but it doesn't matter because it remains the same. There are highly competitive universities that have CEOs, just like there are schools that you could get into tomorrow that have CEOs. It is proof in the pudding that what you do in college is more important than where you go. It's proof that when we talk about being a lawyer, going to Wagner College can get you to a school like Harvard, just like going to UPenn could end up burning you out and not having you go anywhere for law school. So stop asking the question of what is the best school and focus on what's right for you. So before we wrap things up on that front, let's return to, or before I answer questions, let me wrap things up on this front. Sorry. Here are your priorities, 11th graders. And for the 10th graders on this call, your priorities right now are slightly different. You should be considering what colleges are out there. You should be trying to do some visits when it makes sense. It's not as much of a priority, but let's say as a family, you're going up to Boston, see a couple schools. But your priorities, 10th graders, are exploring new activities to build out a stronger activity resume and to make sure that your grades are strong so that if you do want to compete at the high level, you don't have to look and go, oh, that C in the 10th grade cuts me out of it. Because it's true, when they say that schools like Harvard and Hopkins and so on are B free, it's very rare you see a student who's not a recruited athlete or double legacy or has something very specific that that school needs getting in without straight A's and uber selective scores, right? But at the same time, you have a 3.0. You're not looking at those schools. What I care about is the activities even more so, because now I can learn about who you'll be on my campus, because I don't need you to be the best student. I need you to be the best version of you. So we strongly encourage that you start early, that you be open-minded to schools, even if they're ones that you may not have heard of before. Tell me why it's a bad fit for you. And if it's because of the ranking, because you haven't heard of it, that's a bad reason. Just like applying to a school because it's highly ranked is a bad reason. Reflect. Teenagers don't do that. It's hard to do with social media. Everything's in the now, what everyone else is doing. But think about what you need and what you want. And truth be told, people exist to help. Me, Kate, Kessler, your parents, your family, friends, you don't have to do this on your own. So to that point, I'm just going to throw this up here so that you have access to my email so that you can reach out. You can ask me for the slides. If you have questions about what I do or just questions about this specific to you, we can do that. But the next 20 minutes, I am all yours. Let's treat this as an AMA. So I'm going to start going down the list of questions and I will try and answer as much as I can. For those of you who need to run, this is being recorded. You can follow up with it later. But if you want to stay for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to dive right in. So, are there specific pathways that you need to start earlier if your child wants to do sports in school, or in our case, crew? Very good question. So, sports like crew, there are very few schools that actually offer it compared to, say, a baseball. And it's a little bit different from like the Division I route because there really isn't Division I for crew, like there is for, say, football and basketball and so on. Crew is something where you want to start getting in touch with coaches as early as August of junior year. So if you're a junior asking this question and it's January and you haven't been doing it, start getting those emails out to all those coaches. Because I'll tell you right now, from Berkeley to Harvard, they already know who they're taking for the most part. But if you're really strong, you can go ahead and start reaching out now. Could you please recommend a few undergraduate institutions which are affordable and good feeder schools for top law schools, like you did for pre-med? I don't have the same list for that because there's actually not a great list for feeder for pre-law. What matters really comes down to your student. So I can't answer that easily because I can list you 200 schools. What I would do here is I'd be looking at schools that have around depending on your student's background, because I don't know anything, assuming you're like in that 3.8, 3.9 range, doing well academically, you can look at pretty much any school that has a 40% or higher admit rate. And if you do that and you find schools that have good pre-law programs, you should be in good standing. But I don't know what size your student wants and so on. So that's a very hard question to answer. What do you think about applying early decision? I think that ED, early decision, for those of you who don't know, early decision is a binding contract where if you get in, you must come. It improves your chances drastically at most schools that offer it. For example, we were talking before this call, my colleagues and I, NYU this year took some students from your area with 3.4 GPAs. You know why? Because they're all afraid right now of the numbers. There are fewer international applicants applying. And so schools that, especially in cities like that or USC, who really used to rely on international applicants, are going to take a lot more kids in ED. Well, you need to ask yourself, if I get in ED, will I pay that money? Because if the answer is no, you don't do it. If you go ED, you are going to that school. Now, for the most part, you're not getting, if you're going ED to UPenn because you think it'll give you a higher chance, schools like that, you got to be one of the best in your class to get in ED. Like, for example, BCC Whitman will have 40, 50 kids each year who apply, and a couple, two will get in ED, maybe another in regular decision. But as you start working your way down into Northwestern, into, what's another good example? Emory, WashU, St. Louis, it does significantly help. So you have to ask what your comfort level is with that number. What's the average application cost per college? Usually about $75. Somebody already answered that. Thank you. Somebody's asking a very specific question about engineering programs. A student likes Carnegie Mellon because the curriculum allows for blending class in different majors. Can you think of other colleges that have combined engineering, design, art programs? That's a good question, actually. Who else has design and art? So University of Rochester, WPI. I'd actually have to look at a list because it's a good question. I don't have a lot of those on the tip of my tongue. Here's what I could tell you though. Schools like Carnegie Mellon, what you're looking at there, again, comes back to the major and the specifics. It is one of the biggest pressure cooker schools out there where students regularly drop out because it is known by many as the school where fun goes to die. That doesn't mean it's a bad school. It's actually an excellent school. But this is where I need to ask you, is this the right fit or we only do it because of the programs? There are a number of them out there. If you want to follow up with me, I can give you a list. Pros and cons of going to college internationally for the whole thing versus just a semester or a year. Well, the pros of going out of school, out of the States internationally is a lot of the time it's cheaper. Even in the UCAS, which is the UK schools, it's still about 20,000 cheaper. If you go up to Canada, some of them are half the price to a third the price. And then you go to Europe, it's a quarter the price of some of these highly selective schools. The con is if you want to go to grad school, it's really hard to matriculate to a US grad school in med or law from international schools because you don't have the same requirements. So if you're thinking law schools, or med schools, I would try and stick in the United States domestically, unless you're comfortable also doing law or med out of the States, but then you're not really gonna be able to apply it in the States. And I think what you're referring to with the semester so is abroad. I think abroad's great. And I think everyone should do it if they have the capacity and the interest. Any thoughts on the difference between prestigious or highly ranked fine arts specific programs versus majoring in fine arts at a more normal college? I mean, here's the thing, right? It's the same thing if you're going to be a bio major. Why do you need to go to the highly selective college? People say, well, because it's already a hard job market when it comes to those majors. Yeah, that doesn't change. People go to Yale as art history majors and go live in mom's basement after, right? Just like people will go to Wichita State in Kansas for an engineering program and end up working at Boeing the year out, right? So again, it's not about the rank, it's about the major there. Will you please share the video? Yes, video will be shared. Slides. If you want slides, I'm going to email them to Kate and Sarah when we're done. You can also email me. What else do we have here? Do many schools or just some allow you to defer after being accepted? Most schools allow you to defer, but it depends on the reason. If you're deferring because I just don't want to go this year, The more selective schools, say at Dartmouth, won't do that. But let's say you're deferring because you decide that you actually want to go to Israel and be part of the IDF and serve your 2 years, or because you have a sickness and you need a semester off. Most schools are willing to do it as long as you either have a good gap year program or there's a reason to do so. If you're only doing it because you don't want to go yet, the more selective the school, the less I've seen them actually be okay with that. For someone asked, do we offer services for programs like BSMD, which is the specific 7 to 8 year program to pursue going directly into med school? The answer is yes. I will tell you right now. I tell every student, there's actually no, that's a lie. There's one student I've worked with in the past 10 years who I told her BSMD made sense. She had everything and she applied to 13 BSMD programs and she got into one of the 13. BSMD has a 1-ish% admit rate. You are one of 10 to 30 to 40 kids who are going directly into a program where you might get into it. And most of the students who want to do this decide they want to do it for Browns, PLME, and others. Even Northern Oklahoma's program has a 3.5% admit rate. So if you're going the BSMD route, well, yes, we offer it. I'm going to, just like anyone else, I would say why. Which non-prestigious schools do you recommend for engineering East Coast? Well, East Coast is a large area, but to throw some examples out there for time less selective, Rochester Institute of Technology, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, all good tech schools, all with that 40 to 50 to 60% admit rate. Okay. Then you have the state schools, University of New Hampshire, University of Maine, West Virginia University, right? It's very easy to think and go, ew, West Virginia. No, engineering, what matters there is that you can handle those first classes in freshman and sophomore year. You may not know this, but you're going to be doing Calc 1, 2, 3, 8, physics on 3 different levels. Even if you got a 5 on Calc BC, you might be able to switch out of Calc 1 to 2, but I'd still recommend Calc 1. So again, when it comes down to it, the engineering is what do you need to be successful? Right? Do you need a large school? Do you need access to a city? GW's got a great engineering program nowadays. You could go down, most state schools have engineering programs now, just so you know, because it's such a big pull. So you can go look at Appalachian State in North Carolina. You can go look at Auburn University, Florida Tech, and Florida Atlantic and Florida International. There's a lot of them out there. Let's keep going here. Assuming some elite schools are a fit, when would you not recommend applying to them? Well, if they're all within the same application timeline. It's if you're applying to elite schools, it's a November 1 deadline for ED. It's a December 1 to 5 deadline for RD. And now, if you're talking about like when would you start considering which ones are right for you and so on, that I would recommend now. If you were European, would you choose to study in the US or Europe? So again, the question isn't about that. It's about, do you want to go to med or law school to me? If you're trying to go and get a great degree and then come back to the States and work, I love the idea of you going abroad. In fact, maybe you end up getting a great job in London or Paris. You can spend some time over there. If you want to go to law school or med school or grad school in the US, going international makes that tougher to do. If you apply to a school after high school but are not accepted, can you then apply again after 2 years in college? Well, yes, you could apply even the year after. If what you're asking is, can I go, like you have different options. You can go to community college, which everyone golfs at. It's a great way to save money, to get general education out of the way, and then go to a highly selective school potentially if you did well. Or you can transfer out of, let's say it's UMBC after a year if you did well, right? But yes, you can try and transfer in. You'll have another application process. How does one determine what schools are likely to give substantial merit scholarships? A student with solid grades and SAT scores may not stand out at one of our local high schools, but might look more of a standout nationally, correct? So it's a really good question. There's 2 things to remember here. One, merit tends to be connected to your overall GPA and test scores. Test scores are coming back into play and where you fall within that school's averages. So if you have a 1420 SAT and a 3.8 unweighted GPA with strong rigor, you're probably not getting much money from a Williams and Amherst or anywhere that's high competitive. You'll be lucky to get in essence, right? But if you start looking at less selective schools and they really want to attract you, they will offer merit. And one of the things I always recommend is stop looking locally. Sure, you can look at some of the local privates, like I was talking about before, Roanoke, Shenandoah, Dickinson, Allegheny. These are Muhlenberg. They'll give a lot of money because they know that locally, students are more likely to stay local with those smaller schools. But you know who gives a lot of our kids money? University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, the University of Oregon, the University of Utah, Arizona State, and University of Arizona, right? You know why? These are schools that have trouble attracting students from the Mid-Atlantic. Because at a certain point, people decide, I don't want to go that far from home unless it's for a highly competitive school, or, I actually rather go to a school that's a 4-hour drive. So we all start applying to Penn State and Pitt. Penn State and Pitt takes a lot of kids from our area. They don't usually give a whole lot of money because they don't need to. So they're going to attract students for the reasons I just mentioned. So if you want to be looking at merit, also consider geography. The University of Kansas is a great example of this, as is the Iowa State. These are two schools that have highly competitive business programs, engineering programs, a number of great programs. But if I looked at the crowd right now, I'd see people going like, did he really just say Iowa State and Kansas? What does he think of me? Here's the truth. They're great schools, but no one wants to go to the Midwest. At least not for those schools. They'll go for Michigan or the Geist School at UIUC or Kelly at Indiana, but they won't go for anything else, right? Stop being snobby. And if you stop being snobby, you're going to find schools will give you a lot of money. Rolling admissions, what does that mean? Rolling admissions means that as you apply, they start considering. So University of Pittsburgh is a great example of this, okay? The University of Pittsburgh, as you apply and they get everything they need from you, they will start the review process. So if you apply to University of Pittsburgh and they have everything they need from you by August 20th, you'll probably hear by late September. And the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get in. Because as the season goes on, they've admitted more kids, and they say, we've already admitted 2,000 kids from Montgomery County. We're going to put a stop to it right now, even if it's a good candidate. We don't need more right now. So if you're applying to rolling admission schools like UPitt, like Arizona State, like Michigan State, so on, do it earlier. And the commitment, just like any school, is by May 1st of senior year. Now, side note, big state schools, if let's say Clemson's your dream school and you get in October 15th, like you fly October 15th and you get in December, and you know that this is top school on your list other than maybe UCLA, you won't hear from until late March, deposit early and work through the housing information early. Why? Because big state schools like Clemson have been running out of space for freshmen. Big state schools, it happens all the time. You don't need to do it right away, but by early spring, I would do it. Because if you wait till late April, you may find that you're one of those students who's in that nightmare situation that's living in in a dorm room, which is actually a hotel. So just a side note to consider. Does applying test optional hurt an applicant? If a school is test optional, it doesn't necessarily hurt you, but you have to ask yourself, if that school is test optional and there's a lot of other kids from my school or my area who are applying with test scores, are they going to like that data point from that kid if you don't have it? They do prefer it. But if you're a really strong candidate and they are truly test optional does not hurt you. What organization do you recommend for study abroad? It's not necessarily an organization. Most schools offer organizations. But like if you're saying like if you want an in between for a gap year, Verto, VERTO has become very popular. Do universities still value diversity in admissions? Oh man. Do universities still value it? Yes. Has the current administration sort of made that harder to place as an obvious value? Yes. If my kid has 1C, how highly would you recommend they retake for a higher grade, even for less prestigious schools? So another conversation I was just having. Everyone in Montgomery County, if they have a C or a B, thinks I got to make it up over summer. And you can, right? But colleges do see on there, they either put SS for summer school, or instead of it being in freshman year where it was 23, 24, now it's showing under 25, 26. So they will see that. Secondly, if the C is the thing you're talking about being the barrier to entry, you're thinking about it wrong. Kids get into college all the time with a C or 3Cs or 4Cs or 5Cs. What I care about is who you are as an individual. What is it that you're going to bring to my campus outside of that? So you have a great kid who volunteers locally, part of 4 clubs, 3 sports, and you're looking at Ohio State onto, Coastal Carolina and so on. I don't care about a C, but the more selective, the more that becomes a barrier to entry. Is there a way to find schools that do reciprocity for in-state tuition? Looks like that's been answered. Yes, the academic common market. Thank you. Any universities near DC that offer support specifically students on the autism spectrum or provide strong disability services? Yes, there's a number of them that do so. It looks like Ms. Heald already suggested you reach out to your local CCN, but I actually have a student who is currently I have 2 students, one who is at Juniata in Pennsylvania, another one who is at Muhlenberg in is that Westminster, Maryland? I believe so. Point being, there's a lot of smaller liberal arts.
Muhlenberg's in Pennsylvania too.
Muhlenberg's Pennsylvania. All right, there you go. See, I don't know everything. Which is the one that's in Westminster, Maryland? Tell me, because it's good.
McDaniel.
Thank you. I knew it was another one.
Muhlenberg's in Allentown.
That's it.
Yeah.
McDaniel's. Okay, sorry. I knew it was an
And
N. Sorry.
McDaniel's a great school.
But McDaniel's the one I was thinking of, not Muhlenberg.
Yes.
One that's in Westminster. I was
And they give automatic $20,000 a year if your parent is an MCPS employee.
Ooh, they also give a lot of merit aid, even if not, and they have a really good service for students with autism. I know a student there. If you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to kind of connect you with the parent. So if you want to chat with them, assuming they're willing to, but I'd be happy to do that. Do many colleges and universities opt out of the Common App or otherwise have additional requirements? Almost every college is now on the Common App. The only schools that aren't on the Common App are MIT, the University of California system like UCLA, UC Berkeley, the Cal State system. Even Georgetown's moving on to the Common App next year, which is going to be a bloodbath. But almost everyone is on the Common App if it's a domestic school. Many do have additional requirements, like an extra letter of recommendation. They require one instead of allowing one. Many have supplemental essays, but everyone's on the Common App for the most part. Does diversity still matter to prestigious universities? It does, but if that's a question we're asking, we're already losing the fight. Something about if I have a certain background, I have a better shot. They don't care about that in the way that you guys think that they do. They care about why you are the better student from your school than the other 60 applicants that they're going to get who also have a 4.0 unweighted and full IB or 12 APs and all these interesting things. So if you're applying to the school because you come from a mixed background, good for you. They don't look at it that closely. They care about it at a certain point, but they're going to care a lot more about everything else you have to offer. So for example, it's very rare I see students get into Ivy Leagues who don't have some sort of national or international awards. For example, my student who got into UPenn this year, she was nationally ranked for all 4 years of high school in both speech and debate and moot court. In fact, in her senior year, she traveled to 2 international competitions. She won one, she placed second in the other. And so UPenn decided, yeah, she's going to join our speech and debate team, right? That's why they took that kid instead of one of the other great candidates from her school. That's what we're talking about with the Ivies here, folks, just to kind of set the tone. All right, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to, if there's no more comments, I'm just going to finish out with what we have. Are most schools going back to tests required? The general rule of thumb there is if it's a red state, you can expect that they're going back to tests required because testing has become somehow a bipartisan-esque thing. Republican states and red states are leaning more into it, like how Florida and Georgia never did away with it, even during COVID. And even some of the purple states, we're starting to see that return. Here's the thing, juniors, if you haven't already, take an SAT or an ACT. It's better to try it and see what happens and see if you can get to where you want than to get to August and not have done it, realize that 2 of the schools you love require it, and find yourself trying to rush it through fall. Because for every one of my students, by the time they're back in school, by that time, their Common App is done. We're working on supplemental essays because those don't release until August 1st. But once they're back in school, at least a third of their essay work is done, and we're just kind of finishing out of the next couple of months. Most students
Just a reminder, all juniors in MCPS will take the SAT in school on March 11th. So keep an eye out for word from your administrator.
Where was I? Oh yeah, many students don't actually go and do this until August. They don't start any of it. Use this summer wisely. You can start your personal statement whenever you want. I tend to suggest right after the AP season, late May. In fact, I believe Miss Heald and I are and Miss Kessler and I are planning something in May for us to start talking about the personal statement. But that's around the time you start this process. Don't be waiting till fall. Are there any other colleges you know of that have benefits for children of veterans or active military? Look up Yellow Ribbon. Schools offer something called Yellow Ribbon and whatnot. That's something that a lot of my students use who have students who come from veteran backgrounds. There's a whole list online. There's a lot of them. Can you speak to essays? Not today. We have 3 minutes. We do a full seminar on that. I can tell you it's important, but I can't really delve into it today. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be cagey. That's an entire session. Are there other alternatives for people to write letters of rec if your child does not have a strong connection to a current academic teacher? Yes, some colleges will allow you to include an external rec, but here's the truth. The more competitive the school, the more they need it to be. An 11th grade teacher could speak highly of you because it's another factor that helps us differentiate. Now, let's say we're not talking highly competitive. Most of the highly competitive schools don't even require one rec. They require your counselor to send your transcript and school profile, which every school requires, but many don't even require recommendation. But if that's something you're talking about, my kid doesn't have a strong connection with their teacher, it's junior year, It's time to make that happen because for more selective schools, it does matter. Do some colleges blacklist high schools for historically low yields? For example, UMD for BCC. Yeah, you just said it. BCC didn't have a great route with it in the past couple of years. That said, what Ms. Kessler pointed out is the yield is now higher because of that. It used to be that they'd take hundreds of people and 100 of them would come and their yield was low. Now, by taking fewer students and targeting certain demographics within a school, their yield is higher. Why does yield matter? It makes sure that school gets the number they want and it moves them up in the rankings. Yes, rankings come back into play, which is silly, but that is why. So, for many years, school students at WJ, BCC, RM snubbed UMD. It's why we've seen a drop in the number of students they've been admitting as of recent. Okay, I'm going to answer 2 more questions and then I am going to pause because it's already 7:31. When do you start applying for schools? You can start the application process in theory now. The basic info can be started as soon as you want. I tell my students you start it in mid-May so that by late July, you have all the basic information done, the personal statement done, and then schools start rolling out their school-specific supplements and you work on those starting in August. Okay, I think that's all we've got. Kate, do you want to wrap us up?
Sorry. Yes, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording though, because then I don't have